I never thought I'd be living in a camper van, typing away on my laptop outside a coffee shop just to use their Wi-Fi. But here I am, 6 months after discovering the truth about my marriage. I'm 35, and until recently, I had what I believed was a perfect life, a caring wife of 12 years, an amazing 12-year-old daughter, and a comfortable home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I worked as an electrician for the city's power grid, making decent money and enjoying what I did. We weren't rich, but we had enough to take small vacations, maintain our house, and even save a bit. My wife worked at an insurance firm, and we managed our schedules well enough to always have family dinners and weekend activities together. We had what I thought was a solid relationship, regular date nights, shared interests, and open communication. Or so I believed. Everything changed on a Tuesday evening in March. I came home late after a mandatory safety training session. My wife had fallen asleep on the couch, and her phone lit up with a message. The emoji-filled text caught my eye, the same kind I would use when messaging her. Something felt off, and for the first time in our marriage, I checked her phone. What I found shattered my world. She had been having an affair with her coworker for at least 5 months. I knew him. We'd been to his house for dinner, met his wife and 3 young kids. The youngest was barely 2 years old. I took pictures of the messages, went upstairs, and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling all night. The next morning was surreal. My wife complained about neck pain from sleeping on the couch, but I barely heard her. Everything felt muted, like someone had turned down the volume of the world. I went through the motions of breakfast, watching my wife and daughter chat away. They didn't seem to notice anything different about me. That's when it hit me, maybe they never really noticed me at all. For the next 5 days, I barely spoke. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, and went to bed. Nobody seemed to care about my silence. On the 6th day, my wife finally asked if something was wrong during dinner. I didn't answer, just shrugged and continued eating. She accepted that and moved on. The next day, I didn't go to work. Instead, I packed some camping gear and basic supplies into my car. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for my wife to return. When she came home with groceries, she immediately started talking about her day while unpacking. Our daughter joined her, and they chatted about sales at the store. Their backs were turned to me. I felt invisible, like a piece of furniture in our kitchen. Looking back at our life together, all I could see were moments where I was just a convenience, a prop in their lives. The pain hit me like a physical blow. I stood up and threw my water glass at the wall. They spun around, shocked to see me crying and shaking. "I know about your affair," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my clenched jaw. My daughter turned to her mother, asking if it was true. And then something remarkable happened. They started arguing with each other, completely forgetting about me. I walked out, got in my car, and drove away. They didn't even notice I had left until 15 minutes later, when the calls and texts started flooding in. The next morning, I withdrew half our savings and called my boss to say I wouldn't be coming in. He threatened to fire me. I didn't care. I drove to the other man's house and gave his wife copies of the messages I'd found. I left her crying on her front steps and checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. Things took an unexpected turn when my wife's brother, a local police officer, showed up at my motel room 3 days later. He handcuffed me and drove me home instead of to the station. What followed was a scene I'll never forget. As soon as we entered the house, my wife and daughter started yelling at me about how selfish I was for making them worry. I remained silent, which only made them angrier. Eventually, my wife screamed, "Say something." I looked at her calmly and said, "I have nothing to say to you." Her brother lost it. He slammed me against the wall, still in handcuffs, and started shouting in my face. Something inside me snapped, and I started laughing. I knew his wife had left him recently, so I taunted him about it. He punched me hard, and I fell. As I tried to get up, still laughing, I noticed blood on the floor. I spat blood at him, and he knocked me unconscious. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion, throwing up the moment I opened my eyes. They were all there, my wife, daughter, and her brother. A nurse came in, and I told her I wanted them gone, that I would leave if they came back. She wasn't happy about the idea of me leaving, but agreed to keep them away. In the quiet of the hospital room, I could finally think clearly. I decided to disappear completely. I wrote 3 letters. To my wife's brother, I warned him to never contact me again, or I'd report him. To my daughter, I explained that her mother's betrayal meant I couldn't be her father anymore. To my wife, I wrote a longer letter about practical matters, telling her to sell the house, that I wouldn't pay any bills, and that she'd need to handle the divorce if she wanted one. I regret adding one final line about how much she hurt me. It felt like giving her one last piece of myself to destroy. One evening, I snuck out through the fire escape. The alarm went off, but nobody stopped me. I got back to my motel, traded my car for a small RV, and left town. I got a new phone and only gave the number to my father, warning him that if he shared it with anyone, he'd never hear from me again. For months, I grieved what I'd lost, but gradually realized I was mourning an illusion. The loving family I thought I had never really existed. I became a ghost, using only a P.O. box for mail, keeping my valuables in a safety deposit box, and working odd jobs for cash. I started hunting and fishing for food, brewing my own beer, and living simply in my RV. I made new friends at hunting camps, gave everyone a fake name, and spent most of my time in nature. I got into the best shape of my life. I had no obligations, no pressures, and surprisingly, I found peace in this new existence. Sometimes I'd visit crowded places, malls, train stations, bus terminals, and watch other men like I used to be. Men sacrificing everything for families that didn't appreciate them, working themselves to death for more things they didn't need, wearing that same empty stare I used to have. I didn't know if I was divorced, if I owed child support, or what happened to our house. My father tried to tell me a few times, but I shut that down. He was the only connection to my old life that I maintained, and even that was minimal. I planned that when I reached the end, I'd sell everything, burn through my money, and walk into a national park, never to be seen again. But life had other plans. After sharing my story online one day, everything changed again. Reading people's responses to my story started making me feel strange. The world began to feel muffled again. Just like that day, I confronted my wife. I called one of my hunting friends, Hawk, and asked him to come over. He stayed on the phone until he arrived, immediately confiscating my ammunition. He must have sensed something was wrong because he called my father, who drove 4 hours to reach me. They took me to a doctor, and I ended up in a psychiatric facility. The doctors said I had emotional trauma and depression. All those things I thought were normal, the numbness, wanting to be alone, laughing when getting beaten up, were actually signs of serious mental health issues. My father told me my daughter had been asking about me, that she loved me. I hadn't let myself believe that before. Even my wife's brother sent me a message explaining that my wife hadn't told him the full story when she asked for his help. He'd reported himself to his superiors and faced suspension and anger management training. He even prepared paperwork for me to file a complaint that would get him fired. After a week of treatment and therapy, I started improving. My daughter visited, telling me she forgave me and never meant to make me feel unappreciated. At first, I didn't believe her, but therapy helped me see that my doubts were my own issues. She moved in with my brother temporarily since I wasn't ready to be a full-time parent. My wife moved back with her parents. Her affair partner tried fixing things with his wife and cut all contact with her. According to her mother, she lost her job and barely left her room, shunned by everyone who knew what happened. I hired a lawyer and started divorce proceedings. I bought Hawk a case of his favorite whiskey to thank him for saving my life. Without him and the people who pushed me to see I needed help, I might not be here today. The house sold quickly, and I used the money to buy a small cabin in the woods, not tiny, but simple, with 2 bedrooms and a huge porch overlooking the forest. My daughter loves it here. The divorce is almost final, and my wife agreed to give me everything, though I plan to split it fairly once it's done. She asks for another chance almost daily, but accepts my boundaries. She only wants to rebuild her relationship with our daughter, which I support despite their current strain. We're all in counseling now, individual and family therapy. My daughter watches carefully how I treat her mother, so I make sure to be respectful. I'm still not the same person I was before. I prefer being alone except for my daughter, and I don't trust easily anymore. But I'm not unhappy. The quiet life suits me now. Looking back at when I first posted my story, I was in a dark place. Getting harsh but honest feedback helped snap me out of it. While our family as I knew it is gone, we're all finding our way forward. My daughter has both parents in her life, even if we're not together. I've learned that sometimes breaking down completely is the first step to rebuilding something better. I still enjoy the solitude of our forest home, but now it's a choice rather than an escape. Sometimes healing doesn't mean going back to who you were, but accepting who you've become. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.